Generally, we like to look ahead on what business should do next and how we can learn from experiences and apply them to the future. But if you don't mind, I think it would be really fascinating to go back and get a sense of what it was like in your offices at the beginning of March 2020, when it dawned on you that all this was coming and that you were going to have to make quite a lot of quick decisions.
Yeah, look, I mean, it seems a long time ago now, and obviously a lot's happened since then. I actually wasn't in the office. I was at home because of COVID. I've since found out, literally on the Monday that Boris came on the TV and said to people that they shouldn't go to pubs. I was sort of in the middle of a personal situation as well, which was quite challenging. And then obviously a few days later, it was pubs are going to close across the country, which was a massive shock. And to give you the context for our business, we have 1,700 managed pubs. We have about 1,000 tenanted pubs where we have tenants, individual businesses, if you like, who rent pubs from us. And we also have a brewery. So you're starting to have to think about, lots and lots of different things. Not only 40,000 employees across the country, but also, as I say, those sort of 800 or 900 businesses that rely on our pubs for their income. So it was a really, really difficult moment, and I'm sure everyone went through the same thing. It was a bit of shock, a bit of what the hell do you do here, and a bit of detail, because frankly we've never had to permanently close pubs, ever before. So how do you do that in the context of the knowledge that you at some point in the future, not knowing when, you're going to reopen? So it was tough. It was very tough from a people perspective, particularly within our industry. Pub managers, pub tenants, their life 24/7 is the pub, and suddenly you're having to tell them that you can't open, you can't have your livelihood. So I think those first few bits were, or those first few days were very, very difficult. Fortunately, we had a bit of insight that something was coming. We put a project team together, or a crisis response team together, a month before this happened. Our owners, our CK Assets, who are based in Hong Kong, and obviously a lot of businesses around the world. So they had tons and tons of insight of what was happening elsewhere around the world, and we had a bit of support there. So we set a crisis team up. We set ourselves 3 objectives about what we wanted to achieve through all this, and that really set us on our way to getting into true crisis management. And actually we've learned a hell of a lot, and obviously talked about learning before. It has been one of the biggest, and I think probably one of the best learning experiences I've ever had, but also our organisations have. So, yeah, tough times, but plenty has come from it, I think.
Do you have any particular crisis management lessons you could share?
Yeah, I think, look, trying to sort of distill it down, because there's lots of learnings as you go through, and then you make tons of mistakes, right? I mean, in any business, you're making tons of mistakes. Having 3 objectives that we set out right at the beginning was massive. It takes too long to go through them, but they were, simply put, they were financial stability of the business being priority 1, supporting our people and our tenants, our partners, if you like, as much as we can, protecting them as much as we can. And then the third one was, how do we come out stronger than our competition? And we use those as the basis for pretty much every decision we made. We were pretty fortunate, actually. We'd launched a whole new culture program across the business literally in March before this happened, and we'd set a new purpose for the business, and we'd set some new values for the way we wanted to run the business, launch those, and actually having those in place was massive, because we sort of lived those values, if you like, in the decisions that we were making. So I think having those 2 things in place, plus a reasonably well-established crisis management process in place, were really, really helpful. And I think the massive learning for me in all this has been communication. And you hear a lot of conversations like this. People, CEOs and others will talk about communication being vital, but we got into a real cycle of almost real-time communication. So at the point where we were hearing what the government were going to do about closing pubs or what the restrictions were, we were hearing it live from government, but we were literally then same day, next day, telling our teams what we wanted to do. And that speed of response and that communication out to 40,000 people was critical to maintaining engagement in the business. And I look back on that and go, I'm going to communicate way more and much quicker now than I did at the start of it.
You hear a lot about this idea of realistic optimism and how it's very important to communicate that to your people. Yeah. Was that how you felt?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I did a lot of video communication. I look back on it actually, and some of that period I had COVID. I was sort of 3 weeks locked in a bedroom, and I wasn't looking particularly well, frankly. But I look at the various times across the year, and you can see it in me how I was feeling and how the organisation was feeling. Because of that, I think at times I wouldn't say panicked, but you looked a bit nervous. At times you looked much more confident because you're going through a different time. So I think that honesty and that integrity around telling people the truth as much as you can without scaring them was really key. And what we started to talk about was, look, we've got a strong backer. The business isn't going to fail. So, but we're in a very difficult situation. And those were the words I used actually to teams to say, honestly, we're losing money hand over fist. And our business lost hundreds of millions of pounds over the period of COVID. But we were honest about it, and I think people respected that. We also did a lot of two-way communication. Again, another learning for us is we did a lot of video communication where we had Q&A sessions, and we did a lot of listening groups with the teams across the business, wherever you work, pub level to working in the brewery or the distribution sector. We listened a lot, and then we acted on what people said to us, and we told them once we've done that we've acted on what you've done. So we didn't sugarcoat it. We said it was difficult, but we said we would be honest and we would use our three objectives to make those decisions. And I think the feedback we've had since is a lot of the team members thought our honesty was quite refreshing, but also reassuring that at certain times the business isn't going to fail. And that wasn't true for lots of other businesses, I guess, around the country, where they had true risks and a true potential to fail. So I think we were lucky in that sense. But honest and open communication absolutely is a big learning from this, and people respect it, I think.
Very interested to hear how you stayed close to, both to employees and have that sense of community with your 40,000 people all around the country, but also with customers, because your ability to listen to customers was clearly taken away because they weren't coming into the pubs. Yeah.
Well, look, we very early on we said to our insight team, we need to go get away and talk to what we call pub goers, and then to some extent people who don't go to pubs, but mostly go and talk to pub goers. So we did a lot of online surveys, a lot of insight collecting from pub goers every 2 weeks. So our executive board, online executive board, obviously started with customer insight about how people were feeling about confidence in the future, what they wanted from a pub when they go back, and we've tracked that ever since. And what they felt about the experience when they did come back. So very early on, it was clear that things like cleanliness, social distancing, wearing of masks, etc., were two pub goers were on one level, people hated it. On another level, it was really welcome. So you were starting to see how polarised people were about going back to the pub. A lot of people wanted to go back to the pub with no restrictions, but an equal number of people wanting to go back to the pub with social distancing, with masks, with screens on the bar, and with table ordering only. So we gained a massive amount of insight from those surveys to really judge what we wanted to do. We took a decision then when we reopened in July last year that we were going to create a thing called PubSafe, which was basically a set of promises to our customers to say you would get X, Y, and Z when you came to a Greene pub. And that was just purely driven from that pub goer survey. And for good or bad, I'm glad we did that, and it was consumer insight based. We then spent a lot of time talking to our people through listening groups, which filtered all the way back up to the exec to understand, how our teams were feeling about coming back to work, about how they felt about vaccines. It's, when we got to the vaccine stage. So we've continually done that. And then in terms of engagement with teams, we've got say 40,000 people. It's quite hard to keep hold of those, close to those people. But we did things from talent shows through to awards evenings online, through to charity quizzes. I'm sure everyone's done all these. But we did it consistently, almost week in, month in, every week, every month, throughout the whole period of lockdowns. And we maintained a level of management engagement that I'm pretty proud of, actually. And then on top of that, live streams and video updates weekly from me and from other members of the exec team that keep people engaged. How well we did is hard to tell, but our engagement scores, like many other businesses in this sector over this period, have gone significantly up prior to COVID. So again, lots of lessons to take from that.
So there's obviously been a lot of closures in the sector. What will it take for the pub trade to rebound? I understand you're not a fan of vaccine passports.
No. Look, I think one of the big things that has happened in this industry during COVID is as an industry, we have come together, I think, really well. So we have 2 or 3 trade bodies that represent us: UK Hospitality, British Brewing and Pub Association, which I'm a member of the board of, and also the BII, British Innkeepers Institute. And they've done an incredible job of representing the industry. And I think our voice has been heard, actually. I think one of the advantages and disadvantages of pubs in this is, they're very high profile. The government, like when if they want to reopen the country, they like to go and have their photos taken in the pub pouring a pint. But on the other side of it, when they want the country to get vaccinated or to stay under regulations or curfews, they say don't go to the pub. And that is a real issue, actually. It's created quite a lot of negative sentiment about the pub, because every time they talk about restrictions, it's what's happening in the pub. So I think that's been a real challenge, and building back consumer confidence has been difficult. Government support for our employees has been excellent. So furlough was incredible, but that's a support for employees, not for us as an employer. Furlough costs us money every week, and actually, rates, paying business rates, we've had support from government, great, but we haven't had a business to pay rates with. And some of the grants have been good, actually, for smaller businesses. So I think the support's been good. And actually, I think the industry has bounced back really well and has reacted strongly. But this isn't over yet. And, there are lots of pubs that are doing really well, and lots of restaurants that are doing really well. But there are a lot that are really struggling to break even. And, I continually push this message to government. We've had support, but the industry needs more support to get through, to be able to rebuild balance sheets, to start creating cash to reinvest again. And I've been very clear and open with my comments that I think the government should continue to give us business rate support to the end of the year, to allow us to rebuild our balance sheets to get back to a point where we can create jobs again. And that's massive for this industry. We create jobs in the 18 to 24-year-old part of the population better than most other industries, and we do them quickly. And if they want us to bounce back, we need that support. We will start investing again soon, but we need to be in a position where we're creating cash again to do that. And my hope is the industry will do that. We'll do that pretty shortly. When it comes to vaccine passports, I think they're going to be costly to administer, difficult on teams more than anything else to administer, and confusing for the public. And my hope is, certainly for our industry, it doesn't happen.
So one challenge I've read about quite a bit, so there's been quite a few stories in your industry, is talent shortage. So people, either because of the experiences of the last year with COVID, thinking, well, actually, I'm going to try something else, thank you very much, or even with Brexit, actually, and people, EU citizens leaving. How much of a challenge has that been for you, and what measures will you take to mitigate them if it has been a challenge?
Yeah, again, a lot written in the press about this, and again, it isn't absolutely consistent. I think the starting point is, if you'd have asked me 3-4 months ago, were we going to be in a position where staff shortages were a problem, I'd have laughed a little bit, really, because we've lost a lot of pubs, a lot of restaurants, and a lot of businesses across our sector. So you would have thought we would have been in a position where it would be a good recruitment market for us to be able to go and get good quality staff. So it's one that has surprised us all a little bit. I think actually to some degree furlough doesn't help. There's still a lot of people out on furlough, interestingly, and quite a lot of people on flexi furlough. So our ability to give the right number of hours to people to allow them to have an income stream that can support them is challenged. But furlough isn't massively helping that because we need to get people back into work and back into the industry. We have pockets like with chefs, particularly kitchen staff, generally back of house staff, where demand has absolutely rocketed, and that is in part due to a lot of people not returning to the UK from Europe, and a lot of people going back from Europe, and London is a particular issue. And then there are pockets around the UK, like the Southwest, where it is incredibly difficult to get staff, and pubs and restaurants, and you've probably read it in the press, are having to, on some days close, and on some days reduce the sections that they're serving. So it is a challenge. It hasn't been as much of a challenge for us, actually. We have, in certain areas, done really well about retaining and recruiting staff. So it's not acute for us at the moment in the pubs, but it is a problem that I think is going to continue for a little while. And the risk is obviously for some businesses in a very difficult time for us around labour cost inflation. So we're keeping a close eye on that. There is a specific problem in the distribution part of our business and many other businesses in our sector around drivers for HGVs. And that is starting to have some impact on ability to get stock into our businesses, and that is industry wide. But beyond pubs, actually, go certainly into other parts and other sectors as well. That I think could be a problem. So we need to keep a close eye on it. Engagement is key. I think we've done a decent job at that. But there could be some challenges around cost headwinds if this continues for us. And I think again we need government to help and support us in dealing with that issue.
Now we have a lot of quite a few questions have come through, so I might move on to audience questions now, if that's all right, Nick.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, first one here. Thanks for the great conversation. How have your definitions of resilience and opportunity changed during the pandemic?
Wow, yeah, that's a good question. Resilience. I think a lot of people have been tested around this. And I look at some of my people, and you often think CEOs or board members have to be resilient in these situations. They go, how do you cope? And I actually look at it slightly differently. I think the people who've been challenged the most actually are people who have had to continue working while they've got kids at home, schooling, or have got very difficult situations of working at home. How some people have managed to deal with those issues has inspired me, actually. And I think the biggest thing for me through all this has been watching the team step up and dealing with an incredibly difficult situation that is unique, never really happened before. And the way they've done that, and the way certainly my team, my exec team, my senior leadership team, but also people on the ground, how they've dealt with it is incredible. So the definition of resilience for me is not about personal resilience; it's about watching how people adapt. And I think many have done an incredible job of that. So, and then the second point, Adam, there was resilience and
resilience and opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I think it's opened up a world of innovation in our business that has been forced, actually. So we look back on it, and I think we were pretty slow as a company in innovating and getting the impact of that innovation through the business. And I think this forced us into really working hard on how we innovate and how quickly we innovate. And I think that opens up a big opportunity for us in the future.
This one's quite interesting. Did your crisis team have a time frame in mind? People thought we'd be over the worst by summer 2020. So would decisions have changed? Have you realised there would be more than one wave of infections?
Yeah.
Time machine kind of question.
Yeah. It's funny, we had a conversation about this right at the beginning. We sort of said, how long is this going to last? And we sort of said we reckon 2 to 3 months at the beginning. And I'm sure a lot of people have these conversations. We soon realised it was going to last longer than that. My crisis team is still running, actually. So we still meet on a weekly basis. It's become shorter, but it's the same team, actually. And I think one of the big learnings for us on it was that actually part of what we were trying to do with the organisation was push decision-making, push autonomy further towards the customer and away from the centre. Actually, I think what we ended up doing going the opposite way in terms of crisis management, because suddenly there was no one left in the business, so it became very centralised, actually. And we're now trying to disseminate again. But I don't think we would have made different decisions. The big thing I've learned from this is every day, it's going to change every day. You have to adapt and be resilient. So we've actually put no time frame on the crisis team now. We just said we'll decide when it's right. We'll stop that team from operating, and we'll distribute everything out into the rest of the business. But for now, we're going to continue with the crisis team, and when it ends, it ends.
Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here, this one is: have you rewritten your talent strategy so you have the right people in the right jobs to succeed in the future? And how are you filling urgent gaps?
Yeah, I don't think it has changed actually that much. I think that there's some short-term strategic stuff, some short-term tactical stuff that we're now having to do in terms of going out and supporting the recruitment process. And that mostly is about resource, actually, because obviously the scale of our recruitment across our business is pretty big, and we've certainly put more resource into it in the short term. I think one thing it will do is definitely change the way we think about the particular demographic who work within our industry. I think it's opened our eyes a little bit to understanding what people want from an employer. And maybe we weren't close enough to that before the crisis. So I think actually we probably got closer to our employees. We've got a better understanding of what they want from an employer, and we'll probably adapt a little bit to the cultural work that we've been doing in terms of the values of the business. We won't change the values, but we might adapt the way we talk to our employees, the way we communicate with them, the way we interact with them on the back of this, and the learning that's created for us.
So, Nick, what does pub mean to you personally? Do you have a local yourself? And I'll just give, what is your take on the value of pubs to the community in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah.
I'll
take the last one first, because I think one of the massive things that's happened here for our industry is we've understood as pub operators the importance of community much better. I mean, the pub has always been about community and about helping and supporting community. But I think again, it's just refueled people's understanding of that, particularly pub managers and landlords. Some of the stuff that our teams and our tenants have done for communities during the crisis was incredible. We're starting to see this coming in about, we supported food banks. A lot of the food that we had in stock, we just gave away to food banks. Local pubs were cooking meals for hospitals. We were delivering food to all the people who couldn't get out. I mean, there was an incredible amount of stuff done. And actually, I think it's re-engaged people's view of a pub as a community asset. Particularly, with you can see what's happened with people coming out of London and coming out of city centres and working at home. I think it's re-engaged that community feel around the pub. And I think one of the big things that will do is actually refocus pubs and refocus managers to connect better with communities again. I do have a local. The manager of that local doesn't like the fact that I live literally down the road from there, and my in-laws go and eat in there. But it is my local that I drop into, and I probably spend more time in that one than I do in the rest of our pubs. What do they mean to me? I started my career in the pub industry way back in the 90s. Went away to work for Merlin Entertainments for 17 years, which was absolutely brilliant, but always felt like I wanted to come back to pubs. I love being in a pub. I love the feeling of being in a pub. I love the atmosphere in pubs. And what we need to get back to is the atmosphere in a pub like it used to be. And, you know, the biggest thing that can happen to this industry is on what I hope will be Freedom Day on the 19th of July, is that we can go back and drink in a pub again.
Have you changed the way you work as a company to try and future-proof the business?
Just because of the way we're operating online. And we've definitely changed from all the learnings that I talked about earlier. We'll take risk management a bit more seriously, I think. Although we did take it very seriously, we used to be a PLC, so risk management was important. But I will always look at risk registers and risk management and go, what if, more than I would have done previously. I would imagine on every risk register in the company was global pandemic, but I'm not sure every company was ready for a global pandemic. You know, I'll look at that differently now in terms of the way I think about long-term and bigger scale risk. But I don't think we'll change. I think the heart of the company is our businesses and our people. You know, we'll definitely change the way we interact, as I said before, with our employees. But you know, I think we'll continue to be what Greene King has always been, is a family. What was a family business and still is a real family business that is based around community pubs that are so important to the communities within which they operate.
And this is picking up on something you said earlier about the values, your new values. So what were the new values for Greene King as a business, and how did they help you to respond?
Yeah. So, well, I won't go through all of them because it'll take forever, but I can sort of pick a few off. It's quite a common value. I've had lots of these in our business, but we put a value of we care into the set of values. And actually, how did that make us think differently? I definitely think we are a more caring business now than we were before. But, you know, I go back to things like putting in an employee support fund into the business that we funded with about £1.5 million worth of company money into a fund that basically supported team members who were struggling. So they could apply for grants, they could apply for food vouchers if they were in absolute dire straits. And that decision to put that in place came from the value of we care, along with the support for our tenants. So, you know, we've probably given about £30 million worth of support to our tenants through rent freeze. So none of our tenants paid anything more than 10% of their rent while the businesses were locked down and closed. So again, it came from our values. And I think the other one that would be key is we have a value called WIP, learn, celebrate together. And you know, learning is key now. How do you take the learning from this and put it into the future way that we run the business? And you know, those values are critical and important to us. And you know, I think we've definitely embedded them through the crisis, probably better than we would have done had the crisis not happened.
Fascinating. I think we probably have time for one more, I reckon. So has there been any major change in the resource allocation and utilisation policies due to the pandemic?
So that's a really good question, actually. There's been practical changes through reopenings and through, in our breweries, for example, through, you know, changes in the amount of beer we're brewing and the capacity of the brewery, and based on, you know, on demand. So we've been much more tactical during this about how we managed resource allocation. You know, we've decided, and we're in the process now, we were going to go through a strat planning process now to really understand where we wanted to allocate resource, whether that's people resource, whether that's capital, etc., through the business as we come out the other side. So we're mid strat planning, which you know, some might say is crazy, but actually I think it's been a really good process about starting to think about what we do towards the end of this year and into next year, as hopefully things get a bit better. But it has, I'd be honest and say, it's just been incredibly tactical because the circumstances have changed, you know, day in, day out, actually, about how we allocate resources.